It was fate for me. Growing up, I loved movies. I watched movies on TV at home. Once a year, the family got together and we watched The Wizard of Oz. It became a family ritual, not only in our family, but for millions of families across America. And I fell in love with movies from watching that film and always wanted to be part of the process. And ultimately, I ended up in Hollywood. My name is Jeff Baker. I spent 37 years in the home entertainment industry, and I became known as the King of Catalog. "40 years ago, there was a cultural revolution in the United States. The revolution took place between feature film and the consumer, and it was driven by the advent of new technology, specifically the creation of videocassette recorders. The first videocassette recorder was released by Sony, and it was called the Betamax.
Sony's revolutionary Betamax deck, which hooks up to any TV set, can actually videotape something off one channel while you're watching another channel.
Shortly thereafter, a number of Japanese companies introduced a similar technology, which they called VHS.
Relax, Panasonic VHS tapes up to 4 hours of sports, movies, specials on one cassette.
All these companies give you VHS, and only VHS can give you 4 hours.
This was the first time in the history of mankind that consumers could actually buy and own a pre-recorded movie and have it in their home. In June of 1979, I moved to Minneapolis to work for Pickwick International. My first job there was video product manager. That basically entailed negotiating and buying finished VHS and beta cassettes from movie studios and major suppliers of entertainment. The wholesale division basically operated in department stores like Sears, and in the retail division, Musicland and Sam Goody. The top-selling movie that we had was Saturday Night Fever. Paramount also had another film called The Godfather, which was a very big seller. And most of the films that were selling were genre films. They were westerns, they were comedies, they were action films. Now, at that time, the movies retailed for between $45 and $80 per film, which was in 1979, 1980, a lot of money. But you have to realize that at that time also, the first consumers who were engaging with this new technology were spending between $1,200 and $1,500 for the video cassette recorder. It was a very affluent consumer who would be able to engage at that time. In March of 1981, I was recruited by RCA. They had a line of television sets, the RCA brand. They also had a very extensive business in entertainment. RCA spent about $500 million, and these were 1979, 1980, 1981 dollars. So in today's terms, it would be multiple billions, on a new product called the RCA CED video disc. Now, at that time, there was a product called the laser disc, which a lot of people have heard of.
The encoded information on this disc is read by a laser beam. That means that the picture and sound quality must be far superior to videotape reproduction.
Laserdisc was a very high quality disc that was playback only. It looked like an LP, like a platter, and you would put it into the machine and you would watch movies in a much higher quality than what VHS and Betamax had to offer. RCA was coming out with a product which was also high quality, not as high quality as laser, but it was better quality than VHS, and it was a lower price.
Bring the magic home with RCA.
And here's how to play your video disc on the compact, attractive, easily affordable RCA video disc player. To play, just slide the switch to load and insert the sleeve. The player removes the disc, you remove the sleeve, and you switch to play.
So in March of 1981, when RCA Video Disc introduced to consumers nationally in the United States this new piece of hardware and a selection of 25 feature films that we had licensed from the movie studios, the retail price of the hardware was $499.99. The problem that we had is that we only had 25 movies initially in the first 3 months, but there was, at that time, more than 1,000 pre-recorded movies and miscellaneous concerts and other entertainment available on VHS. So in many respects, in hindsight, it was a flawed strategy. We should have introduced 300 or 400 or 500 films from day one, and that really hurt us, and ultimately the product did not succeed in the marketplace. In early 1986, I went to work for a company in New York City by the name of Good Times Entertainment. Now, at this point in the industry, there were millions of VHS recorders in consumers' homes. Consumers were renting and buying pre-recorded movies, and the business was really beginning to explode. Good Times was essentially in the public domain business. Now, what that means is that older films, particularly but not exclusively, black and white films, which were not registered and copyrighted, fell into what is called the public domain. And therefore, distributors who could find copies of these films would sell these films to independent distributors. But there were no royalties involved, and so the distributors could make as many copies as they want, and they had no financial responsibility to anybody but themselves. And a lot of what drove public domain is the fact that the movie studios had all of their frontline films that had been in the theater roughly 6 months earlier, by the mid-'80s, they had them at artificial list prices, $79.95, $89.95, $99.95. They did this intentionally because they were feeding the rental market, and Blockbuster was just becoming a household name and was opening stores.
What a difference!
Hey, Vinny, long time.
Yeah, been on a 3-evening rental.
Good Times distribution was predominantly through mass merchants like Sears, Bradley's, Caldor's, Kmart, Walmart. So Good Times was really the blue-collar, working man type company feeding the insatiable appetite for consumers who would frequent those mass merchant stores like Walmart. Interestingly enough, what was happening is that at that point in time, the mid-'80s, the movie studios weren't doing great. They were looking for income in places that they had never participated in before. And so I went to a number of the studios, particularly MCA Universal was the first one, then RCA Columbia, which is now Sony, and then ultimately Orion. And I was able to license hundreds of films of what is called back catalog. So films that were 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years old that the studios weren't monetizing. They weren't putting them out into the rental stores, and therefore it was found money for them to get millions of dollars in advances from Good Times, and we were able to license hundreds of films. How you doing? RCA Columbia just signed a deal with us, which is probably the most significant sell-through deal in the marketplace at under $15 that's ever been announced by any major studio. Essentially what they've done is they've taken the Good Times product that we've made available in the mass marketplace for many years now, and they're now making it available to video stores throughout the country through their national distributors. For the first time, consumers could buy not for $70, not for $50, not for $25, but for under $10 retail, major commercial films that had brand name recognition, and it grew the business dynamically, and consumers really started to buy and collect large libraries. The video business really took off from about 85 to 95. Those were the big early boom years. Betamax had gone by the wayside. Laser still existed in specialty stores, but again, it was limited to a very small percentage of consumers. VHS was the predominant format in the marketplace. The other thing we were doing at Good Times was we were taking advantage of the biggest company in the entertainment business then and now, which is Walt Disney. Disney created animated classics, and everybody's familiar with them. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Cinderella, Aladdin, etc. When Disney would introduce a major theatrical film of Aladdin, its first time as an animated feature in theaters, Good Times found a source who took the story of Aladdin, because Aladdin was in the public domain, and we created a full-length animated feature, and we marketed it in packaging that emulated and looked like Disney's packaging, and we marketed those cassettes at $10 retail when Disney was in the theaters. We sold millions of copies of not only Aladdin, but all of those features, and ultimately, Disney, recognizing this trend, was very upset, and they sued us in federal court in New York. I actually was a witness during the trial, and Disney was claiming, not that they had the right to Aladdin in terms of its public domain roots, because they couldn't do that, but they were claiming that the packaging we were using was so similar to theirs in terms of composition of material and color that it was fooling the consumer to think that they were actually buying the Disney version. But we never marketed it as the Disney version, and Disney lost, and Good Times won. And we continued to knock Disney off for the next few years after that as well. In the late 1990s, approximately 1997, technology came into play yet again, and it was called the digital video disc, also known as DVD.
DVD video. A new digital disc format for the highest quality standard of home entertainment.
DVD business became the biggest source of profit for the studios in the mid-90s, and it grew from there. But in 1997, the DVD came out, and the DVD was very different from the VHS cassette. The DVD was digital, and therefore you had what was called random access. As a consumer, with your remote control and your DVD machine, you were able to go to certain spots in the feature film, or you were able to go to extra content, like the original theatrical trailer, or some other material that the director might have made available with the feature film as an extra, a bonus feature, if you will. So technologically, DVD was much more sophisticated than VHS. It was a sexy, sleek kind of package versus the cassette, which was a heavy, thick piece of material.
Once every generation or so, new technology arrives at our doorsteps and changes everything.
Hey, the paradigm's shifting again.
This time, it's DVD, digital video disc.
Well, it's recognized and understood from those people who were in the business at that time that VHS had an early death and demise. But the VHS business really wasn't finished, meaning there was more than 100 million VHS machines in the United States in consumers' homes, and by virtue of drying up the supply of VHS movies, we left that opportunity on the table. We left the VHS business too soon, and it is recognized and understood historically that that was a classic mistake that both the studios and the retailers were complicit in. In late 2002, I joined Warner Music Group, and specifically the label Rhino. And my job there was really to acquire licensed content from the outside and then market it and sell it through Warner Music's distribution group. I was there for about 5 months, and I was negotiating with Warner Brothers, the studio, and in negotiating, suddenly an opportunity came up at the studio, and they asked me if I wanted to come across the street, literally across the highway, and join the studio. And because movies were my love and my passion, I immediately took advantage of it, and I joined the studio. Hi, I'm Jeff Baker. I'm Executive Vice President and General Manager of Warner Theatrical Catalog in the Home Entertainment Division. My role in the company is to oversee the marketing of our library. We have the largest library of any studio in the world, roughly 6,700 films. And each year we look into the library and we find films that are legendary in nature, that celebrating anniversaries, or perhaps the film print is in need of restoration and preservation. And at the same time, we're mining the library for various assets that no one has ever seen before and that we have in our storage facilities around the country. The films that we had were the pre-86 MGM library, which included classics such as Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz, Ben-Hur, and then of course the Warner Brothers library, which was loaded with, the Casablancas and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. We had great classic films, and we had the best library in the industry, hands down. DVD gave us the opportunity to work with filmmakers and to create new content, and at the same time offer multiple versions of a film, which never happened on VHS. We at times had 3 or 4 or 5 versions of the same film in different packaging, different configurations, with physical content, documentaries, and other types of material, and we were able to charge higher prices for the richer content. So it was a flexibility that didn't exist in the VHS world, and it was very exciting. So Warner Brothers was the first studio to introduce what we called the Ultimate Collector's Editions. Well, the vision was to take physical material from the archives of the studio, as well as to create new visual content in the form of documentaries and special features that had never been seen before and that would be created into a special collectible package and boxed in a very rich way. And again, these were very high-end products that would sell for $59, $69, $79, $99. So it was a very big step up for the collector. Filmmakers were extremely excited about the opportunities for DVD and specifically the Ultimate Collector's Editions. Because essentially what it did was give a filmmaker the opportunity to go back and revisit the original material. The Exorcist was probably the most intriguing story that I worked on, not as a feature film per se, but in terms of remarketing the film and in an Ultimate Collector's Edition. What happened in The Exorcist is that Billy Friedkin, who was the director, had hired a cinematographer by the name of Owen Roisman. And Owen early on asked Billy if he could film Billy filming the movie. So in other words, a stealth camera with no audio, no boom, just the visual of Friedkin making the movie. At the end of the film, they went into post-production. Owen went home, and he had it at home, and he had it in the basement of his home. No one knew it existed when we discovered that it existed. I called Owen, I negotiated with him, we made a deal, he gave us the film. There was another film that we were releasing on DVD called The Town, which was a Ben Affleck film. And I came to learn that apparently there was some extra footage taken in a different version of the ending of the film. And Ben told me that hands down, the alternate version, which didn't make it into the theatrical film, was the best version, and it was his vision for the film. And so we were able to create that special version, and it was very, very successful.
And I want to thank everybody at Warner's for supporting these various editions and putting them out on DVD, because it's just tremendous fun as a filmmaker. You make one version of the movie and you're limited to that, and it's really wonderful to know that you can say something different with another version.
In 2008, I met Clint Eastwood for the first time. We had lunch at the Warner Brothers Studios on the lot. And I discussed with him the fact that I had come up with an idea for 35 films in 35 years. At that point in time, Clint had released 34 films for the studio. And it was rumored in Variety that he was making his 35th film in 2009 with Morgan Freeman, and that ultimately became Invictus. So I told him that with that film, he will have had 35 films at Warner Brothers, and if we release it in 2010, it would be 35 years. So he liked the concept, and I said, but the problem is, I don't want to just take 35 films and put them into a box. We've got to do something special. So he said, well, what do you have in mind? I said, I'd like to do a documentary with you based upon your 35 years at Warner Brothers.
Hi. What's up? I always liked the studio. Warner Brothers had great history. I went over there several times during the 50s to do some television shows.
On this stage, Warner's made many of Clint's early favorites.
I've always said that I learned something new on every picture, not only about picture making, about personalities with crew and cast, but also about yourself.
Blu-ray was sort of the laser disc, if you will, to the RCA disc, or the laser disc to VHS when it came out technologically. It was a far superior picture and sound option for the studio and for the consumer, and we felt that it was going to be a natural segue to go, just as we did from VHS to DVD, to go from DVD to Blu-ray. But honestly, the comparisons weren't quite as dramatic as they were from VHS to DVD. The DVD quality was a good quality, and consumer research indicated that the consumer wasn't unhappy with DVD, and therefore Blu-ray became a much tougher sell and took a lot longer to develop, and it never developed into what DVD was. The peak time of the DVD business was in 2007, roughly a year before the Great Recession hit in 2008. At that time, sales of DVDs in the United States in consumer dollars was just about $14 billion. There's still a physical media business, there's still a DVD business, but the business today, this year, 2018, will be roughly $4 billion. So it's gone from $14 billion in 2007 down to $4 billion. So clearly the business has changed. The studio is no longer working with filmmakers to create home video versions and new cuts of films, because it isn't really conducive. If you want to rent a movie or buy a movie electronically today, there's only one movie and there's one price. They don't have 2, 3, 4, 5 versions of the same movie. They don't offer it. So there's no incentive for the studio to work with filmmakers the way we did in that 2005 to 2015 timeframe to create new content. So the business has changed. Looking ahead, the business is going to migrate within the next probably 3 years, perhaps 4 years, into an electronic-only transactional delivery business for consumers. And unfortunately, what's lost in translation is this interaction between the studio and the physical materials that exist from feature films in their archives, and filmmaker involvement on creating special editions and special features for older films. I retired from Warner Brothers in 2015 when it was clear that the business had peaked and had turned the corner. The studios became much more frugal as the home entertainment profit participation in the studio's bottom line became less and less. It became less of an exciting business, less of a creative business to be in as far as marketing library product. Looking back at my career, I was involved in the launch of the pre-recorded video business at Pickwick International. I was involved in the launch of the RCA video disc, which did not make it. I was involved with the launch of the mass merchant, mass involvement with pre-recorded VHS through my experience at Good Times Entertainment. And at Warner Brothers, I had the creative freedom to create new content, new products, work with filmmakers, and having the largest market share of any other studio with catalog product for the 13 years that I was there. When I think back on watching The Wizard of Oz as a family and falling in love with movies in the late 50s and early 60s, and then I speed up and go forward to 2014 when I was at Warner Brothers, I was involved with a project that basically was a homage to the film for its 75th anniversary. And that 75th anniversary, we created, for the first time ever, a 3D version of the film. We met with the remaining Munchkins who were still alive, and we did a documentary about them. So when I think back on it, it's full circle. Watching Wizard of Oz in black and white, then in color, and then the 75th anniversary in 2014, to be able to actually honor the film and have a hand in creating new content for the film was really a great milestone. And so I walked away with a lot of great memories, a lot of great history, and here we are 40 years later.